Hello, mountain bikers of the world. Sorry you don't hear Jared's olive oil voice classic ladies and gentlemen intro because today on the MTB podcast, it is just me and me interviewing the CEO of SRAM, Ken Lousberg, which is a pretty high-level guest, I would say, for the MTB podcast. It was amazing that he took the time out of his day and had the willingness to come on the podcast. And I hit him with some hard questions, some soft questions, some funny questions, and it was, again, just amazing to have him on the podcast and hear his perspective and get to know him. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Here is Ken Lousberg, the CEO of SRAM. All right, Ken, massive thank you for hopping on the MTB podcast. It's an honor to have you on. You're quite the high level guest for us. So thanks again. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. It's fun to be here, and I enjoy what you're doing, and glad to be here.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Well, I'll jump right into it. I think I've got a nice little deck of questions for you. Some softballs and some hardballs. Nothing that I think will phase you, but one of the first ones that I had off the top of my head is how does one actually become the CEO of SRAM? Just out of curiosity for myself and the listeners, what was sort of your career trajectory, and what do you do on a daily basis now?
That's fun. The What you do is you win the job lottery. Um, when you win the job lottery, you get to pick your job. I chose SRAM. Um, the I mean, really, what happened. I came from outside of the industry. I was really fortunate in my career at the company I was at before. Um, but I knew I was going to leave. I had all these chances at that company to do different things. I started out in product design, engineering, um, moved into manufacturing, because I loved people, and then that led to working with customers more. Ended up getting a general manager job, and I had worked for some people that kind of always were mentors and bosses at the same time, and got asked if I would move to Germany, and lead a team over there. So I moved to Europe with my family, and had a really cool job. Thought I was going to be there for about a year and a half. Ended up living there for 5 years, and from there, thought I was going to move back to the U.S., but that same boss asked me if I would move to China instead and you know, lead all of China, for the whole company. Um, that was really cool. Learned a bunch of new cultures, and from there, I got asked to take on the global crane business, out of Switzerland. So then moved my family to Switzerland, and I was I was on a mountain bike ride in Switzerland with my wife when a recruiter called me and asked me if I would be interested in talking to SRAM. I was on my mountain bike at the time, and that was a pretty easy yes to say
Yeah.
sure. I'd love to talk to SRAM.
Wow, interesting. So what was that exact role that the recruiter was calling you about?
SRAM's a pretty special place. It was founded by five friends, and they've been with the business forever. Stan Day was the CEO. He knew he was going to retire, and so he was looking for somebody to replace him as CEO. But I came in as COO so that I could get to know the business, get to know the team, kind of without the, I don't know, the pressure or whatever of being CEO.
Hmm.
He and I just both agreed, hey, we'll know when it's the right time. We didn't have a timeline at all, of when I would actually switch jobs. But I think it was about a year and a half later, that I went from being COO to CEO.
Yeah. Wow. Very cool. So from remind me, what was the industry you said you were in before?
It was construction equipment,
Cranes,
a
you said,
lot
right?
like
Like
bikes,
giant
really.
cranes?
Yeah, yeah. We made every kind of crane you can imagine, and in some ways exactly the opposite of the bike industry in nearly every way. Low volume. One crane could cost over $25 million.
Yeah.
It was some of them were just massive. Um, but like for me, I was a cyclist. Even though I worked in the crane industry, and so SRAM was really appealing to me.
Yeah. Wow. That is pretty interesting. So, what do you think from a personal standpoint? What were some of those just characteristics you had at that crane company that allowed you to obviously get all those opportunities, climb the ladder, and do so well that a recruiter is going to call you up for the COO position at SRAM?
Gosh, I don't know. Um,
You must know. You're just being humble.
Nah, I mean, I actually fit a lot of the things that SRAM was looking for, I suppose. I my bachelor's is in mechanical engineering, and so I just love product. I love hard problems. Um, but having an engineering degree in a product innovation company is really helpful,
Yeah,
right? It's
sure.
probably other than assembler, the second most common job at SRAM would be engineer. Um, and so I hope I have credibility with our engineers. That I really respect and admire what they do. So I think that helps. I like I said, I really attracted to working with people, not just computer screens, and so I had a pretty deep manufacturing, continuous improvement background as well. Spent a lot of time in Japan, learning from the some of the people that invented the Toyota production system at Toyota. Then we're very global. We have team members all over the world, and so me having that experience of kind of really living in and experiencing Europe, for a long time, and then really living in and experiencing Asia for a long time, was really helpful, as well for Stan to understand that I knew, how to operate in different cultures and in different countries. Um, and I had managed a pretty big P&L at that company. It was, I had responsibility for, close to $2 billion. And so Stan knew he wanted the company to grow, and somebody who had that level of experience was really important to him as well. And so, I kind of covered a lot of the things that they were looking for. And I think like most people at SRAM, when you get interviewed at SRAM for a job, your education, your experience, really your capability gets the interview. That's how you get to be interviewed. And then if you're a culture add, if you're a good culture fit and somebody who can add to our culture, really aligned with our values, that's how you get the job. That's how you get selected. And I went through the exact same process anybody else would go through in that regard.
Yeah. Wow. What do you think? I mean, I think it's an interesting topic, at least for me these days, is, say you've got a young 20 something that's, working in the industry that does want to climb the ladder within the industry and also try and balance lifestyle. I think that's a little bit of a holding two opposing things here sometimes in the bike industry is you're in the industry because it's fun and you love it and it's enjoyable, but you want to succeed in it, but there's this balancing act of in order to succeed, you have to work pretty hard, maybe be a little exceptional in order to exceptionally climb the ladder. It's a little bit of a balancing act. What kind of advice would you have for someone in that boat?
It's a great question. I have three boys, and they, two of them at least at this stage would kind of be asking similar questions. But the the truthful answer would be it's not going to be balanced. Um, it may be balanced overall, and that's kind of what I would strive for. But there's going to be times when, if you're the leader, you know that the the problem doesn't care that now is the time you were going to go ride your bike.
Yeah.
And so, it's not perfectly balanced. It just isn't. Over time, I think you can balance things, but there's going to be ebbs and flows where, you can take some time off that you didn't expect to take off. Um, and there's going to be times, I've flown back from vacations before. Really, really hard to do, and I would highly, recommend not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're in a key leadership position, there's going to be times that you just have to. Um, and so, I do think that should go into the decision making process of what job do you want. Um, some people are just smarter than I am. They don't want to be the CEO, and they know they don't want to be the CEO. I totally respect that. Um, and so, but I personally, I do try to have a good work-life balance for sure. I just don't expect it to be 50-50 every day.
Yeah. Cool. I like it. What do you do? Could you sum up like what do you actually tangibly do on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis now? I mean, I'm sure you're holistically overseeing so many pieces of the puzzle at such a large company, but how could you sum up like what do you do these days?
Yeah. I, one of the key things would be I try not to slow our team down. With, if I can remove any bureaucracy or, non-value added meetings or whatever, so that they can really focus on what's important. That's really important to me. I'm not going to design the next really cool product. I'm not going to sell the next really cool product. I'm not going to come up with the promotion idea. um, our team is really good at that, and the more time they have available to do that, the better. For sure, I think a CEO has got to be focused on where are we going 3 years from now, 5 years from now, and painting a picture of what that looks like. And so, I definitely try to spend my time there. But on a more day to day basis, I would say I spend my time just making sure we're all on the same page. We can get pretty excited about, oh my gosh, that's the coolest product ever. We're going to do it. But that doesn't mean we all know what our role is and how we really effectively all pull in the same direction. And so I think that's a big part of my job, or any leader's job, is just to make sure, the alignment of what we're doing, the fit of our activities is as buttoned up as it can be. Um, but also, still leave room for having fun and enjoying what we're doing while we're doing it.
Yeah. Nice. I like it. Well, I had another one question I'll skip because I want to go to the one I think this leads into better is what segment of SRAM is most exciting to you these days? Is it, dealing with the supply chain problems or testing out flight attendant?
It's definitely not supply chain problems. We had a few of those during the pandemic, but that doesn't float my boat. I do love developing relationships with our suppliers and making sure that they're, really aligned to what we're trying to do as well. They're a really important partner. Um, but I would say for me, the two areas that I love are product innovation, without a doubt. Like, you know, thinking about and watching us come up with, something that's going to go through one of you know, your stores or online, 5 years from now. Getting to see that today is pretty fun.
Hmm.
Or the concepts of it. And then just being with the development teams through that process, and what can you do to help. That type of stuff definitely charges my batteries. The other one, and I would say it's like an equal balance scale, is the people side of our business. You know, the team member development, and really working with our partners, whether that's OE partners or bike shops, riders, whatever it may be, but just really connecting on the people side, and trying to figure out what we can do better to kind of help all of us be more successful.
Yeah.
I really like that.
Cool. Well, I mean, if you like that, it sounds like you're in the right job role.
Yeah, I feel pretty lucky, and I know I'm happy. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, are you more of a mountain biker or a roadie? Where would you classify yourself?
In my role, that's a little bit like asking me which of my three boys I like the best.
Exactly. Good answer.
We're pretty heavy on both, but you know, the truth is, I didn't ride a road bike until I came to SRAM. I had never had tight clothes on until I came to SRAM.
Oh, even better answer for the mountain bike podcast.
Yeah, I grew up in Colorado, and so mountain biking and road biking are both really popular there. I think mountain biking gets more of the coverage, but they're both really popular.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I loved riding in the mountains, but I thought the best way to climb a hill in the mountains was on a chairlift and take a mountain bike down. That was my favorite by far, riding. And then I joined SRAM, and we do make a lot of drop bar bikes or components for bikes. And I can honestly say now, well, one, I live in Chicago. There's not a lot of mountains. Still love to ride bikes. And so probably 80% of the time now is on a drop bar bike, either on gravel or on a road. But I still love mountain biking.
Yeah.
And so I think I can honestly say I really, really enjoy both.
Yeah. Cool. I like it. Good answer. Very cool to know. The next question I had for you are what are some things about SRAM that you feel are often missed or lesser known that are still pretty important to you and the company?
That's a really good question. I'll answer it, in the form of my interview, right? So I told you I got called by a recruiter. I start talking to SRAM. I was instantly interested in SRAM because I was a mountain biker. Like, I was literally on a mountain bike ride when I got called the first time. And so as I went through the interview process, that's when I found out how much SRAM cares about people, that it's not just a product company, it's a people company too, and way beyond the people within SRAM's four walls. And so, as I'm going through this, I found out that SRAM, established the SRAM Cycling Fund, where they put in millions of dollars for trail development, for protected lanes, are one of the key supporters of People for Bikes, so that operation can, help with legislation in the U.S. They helped form, Cycling Industries Europe to do kind of the same thing in Europe, and really help the industry come together. And then the one that really flipped it for me was, so I'm going through the interview process. I'm finding all this stuff out. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is kind of amazing. And then I find out about WBR, which is World Bicycle Relief, that spawned out of SRAM when the tsunami hit Southeast Asia. FK Day and his wife were like, we have to do something. FK Day being one of the founders. And so WBR got started. And what WBR does is they provide bikes to impoverished areas, particularly to girls who wouldn't get a high school education unless they can get to school very quickly and back home quickly, like to be able to help do chores. Then healthcare workers, in like Africa, a healthcare worker can see three people if they, go by foot. They can see 10 to 15 if they go by bike. And so bikes go to them. And then, just creating economic engines for families so that they can get out of, just out of this cycle of disadvantage. And so when I found out about that, I'm like, who does that? And and you don't tell anybody that you do it.
Yeah.
You're just doing it because it's the right thing to do. So when I found out about that, I knew I was going to go to work for SRAM. And frankly, Stan Day is the key founder, right? The primary. And like at the, during the interview process, I was like, why don't you tell anybody? I'm like, this is amazing. And, if Stan, it's like, yeah, I'm not comfortable with that. Like it's just, we don't toot our own horn. That's, it's the right thing to do. And, I was blown away by that. And I told him, you may not be able to tell your story, but I can.
Yeah.
And I don't think we do a great job of telling that story really. But I think very, very few people probably know that side of SRAM.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think it's funny you say that, because one of the reasons that I've always really respected and admired SRAM was, at first, getting into the industry as a teenager, it was like, oh, the products, the brands. It was like very, the innovation in the technical product was impressive, and then it was working in the industry and going, oh wow, they're support retailers, they support the sport. There was just all these good things that I ran into that various competitors of yours don't do. And then as I got even further into the industry, I was like, I found out about World Bicycle Relief and all these other various things and the advocacy, and I was like, wow, SRAM is a pretty interesting company that has a lot of layers that I didn't notice at first. At first it was just like, wow, this drivetrain is sweet.
Yeah, that's exactly how I was. Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Very cool. Well, to lead in on the product side, something that we talk about on our podcast here and there, and something that's just been interesting for me to watch. I'm 34 now, and I've been riding mountain bikes since I was 12. And in the last, I don't know, let's say 5 years or so, I feel as if the industry, especially on the product side, has hit a little bit of product innovation plateau. And what I mean by that is, the stuff gets better each year. It gets refined, but how much better? Is it significant or is it negligible? And what I just kind of am curious to hear your outlook on that, right? Because when I look back at how drivetrains worked, 15 years ago, they were very, very much so mediocre compared to how they are now. But if I compare, let's say, just mechanical XX1 12-speed access, or sorry, just Eagle 12-speed Eagle to the latest and greatest transmission, it's definitely better, but like, how much better is it? I don't know. So I'm just curious, like, product innovation plateau. I've obviously seen the industry create products that were so significant to the ride experience. It really made consumers, I got to have that. I'm pulling out my wallet. Where do you see that going in the next few decades?
Yeah, it's a good fair question. Um, I think the bicycle was invented around 206 or 7 years ago, right? Um, and I was just up at QBP yesterday, um, and they are storing a collection of bikes for a historic collector to go into a museum. And so we're all looking at them, and it's pretty amazing some of the innovation that was invented 100 plus years ago that really hasn't even made it to a bike in mass production today. um, and so there are a lot of ideas that are out there that haven't made it to bikes because say the materials aren't strong enough or whatever. um, the and so I would say there's just been 200 years of iteration. The one thing that is very noticeable is today's bike is way better than the bike from 20 years ago, 100 years
Absolutely.
ago, or 200 years ago, right? And so I personally think there has been pretty intense, almost subtle innovation that's happened that you know some people notice it maybe and some don't. Um, but I personally think it's going to keep, we're just going to keep innovating. It's going to keep getting better. And sometimes there'll be you know, a ladder of improvement, and sometimes there'll be step change improvement. Um, and so, the flip side of that, I would say, you have a lot of bikes. You're in a really good position to have a lot of bikes. And so go dig out some of your bikes from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and ride them.
Yeah.
And then I challenge you, and don't ride your new Yeti with flight attendant on it. Right. And so, yeah, I think it just keeps getting better and better and better. Um, and I think it's going to continue to. Can you imagine riding a rim brake bike in Trussell right now?
Yeah.
Right? Would you even do that?
No way. I won't even ride without a dropper post. So
Yeah, and then ride flight attendant. Like it's pretty massive change. Um, and I agree. It's still, it's just a full suspension bike, but it's very, very different. It's not for everybody, but it's, a lot of the innovation is kind of game changing, even though it may seem a bit subtle.
yeah, subtle and iterative, but in aggregate over the course of several years, it is pretty game changing. How do you feel? What is kind of your thoughts and focuses on? You can make things that are pretty innovative that are also quite expensive, like flight attendant. How much focus is on that side as opposed to also figuring out how do we get this level of drivetrain performance at a much lower price point, so more bikes can have and enjoy like the amazingness of a transmission drivetrain. So I guess you could look at innovation in two ways. You could look at it performance trickling down to be less expensive, and then also performance leveling up in a way that's kind of exponentially more expensive.
Yep. Yeah. We really start our focus with, the best of the best. That's what we aim for. Um, and then we do our very best to figure out how can we take cost out of that, but still deliver the same ride experience for the rider, right? And so we try really hard to bring that down as low as we can, but there does get to be a point where it's no longer the same ride experience
Yeah,
if
sure.
if you do X, Y, or Z. And so, we're always trying to do that, but we also, there are others who can do that better than we can, at certain price points, I guess. And so that's their strength. We have ours. But our model is pretty consistent, starting at, what does Nino Schurter need to win the world championship? Let's do that. And then, take it down from there. And actually, like that, just off the top of my head, I think that's a really good example of, is it iterative change or game changing change? When, I don't know if you remember when Nino, what was it, his 34th, no, it was the world championship.
Mm-hmm.
He was in the race. He skidded out like with maybe 2 laps to go. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
And just bounced on his derailleur.
on the drive side.
Everyone thought it was over because they thought he was on, a normal bike with a derailleur hanger, and he was on new transmission. So he got up, caught back up, and ended up winning the world championship, which he just wouldn't have been able to if he had, the previous generation of rear derailleur.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun to keep trying to figure out how do you do that.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, Nino is now not worried about, washing out on his drive side, which is a good sign. What are you worried about? What are some of your biggest worries and challenges? I guess ideally some specific ones, and then some maybe more broad ones regarding the whole bike industry.
That's good. If I start with the industry, probably the thing that I think about a lot would be, the pandemic was bad for sure for the world, but it was incredible for the bike industry. And millions and millions of new riders joined the bike, the
Yeah.
world of biking. I think some people on your favorite trail maybe were frustrated because there were more people on the trail. um, but I do think we forget that we need to keep them in. We need to keep them biking because they vote. They talk to their local government about more trails, about more safe space for cycling. And so I worry partially because it's just the pandemic's over and we're thinking about different things. But I worry that neighbors don't go down to the neighbor who started riding during the pandemic and they don't ask them to go riding, anymore. When they don't keep them in the game, if you
Yeah.
will. And as the industry, that we're not doing enough to do that, from our positions, whether it's a bike shop or a manufacturer like us, um, because millions of new riders is great for everybody. And so I do worry about that. From a kind of more immediate, the the pandemic, it clearly went through it created a bullwhip effect, in our industry, where demand was just normal, for 15 years, and all of a sudden it spiked. And what happens in a bullwhip effect is very predictable. And so now a lot of key players have too much inventory and discounting is very heavy, and so that just isn't good, for an industry. It's hard to run a bike shop when you don't have profit coming in to keep paying people. And so weathering that is clearly a concern as well. Um, I think we can see the light at the end of the tunnel for that, but we're not through it completely. So we all have to keep having faith that this is a bullwhip effect. It's not, that what feels like pain today is just an inventory issue. Our industry, ridership, all of that is positive, and it'll be really positive in a couple of years again.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to say it's a well-deserved hangover because it was quite a good party.
Yeah, and hopefully, people saved some of the benefit and can weather the storm, um, or the hangover. I like that. That is
Yeah.
a lot. That's a really good description.
Thanks. Well, it kind of leads into my next question here, which is I just kind of wanted to put forward a thesis, and this is very much the world that I live in, on a daily basis. I kind of feel, when I look at business models and how they go through phases, and I feel as if the heyday of brick and mortar bike shops, I feel like that was, maybe the 90s to 2010. Then it became sort of the heyday for e-commerce, online, multi-channel retailers like ourselves, like Worldwide Cyclery. And then post COVID, now we're in this different era. Quite a bit's changed when I look back 10 years, and some of the main changes are, a lot of the brands we sell, whether that it's bike brands or component brands of any kind, um, almost all of them have gone consumer direct, and more importantly gotten good at it, like are competing with us on the advertising space and the ad auctions, while simultaneously the margin that retailers have to survive on has just gotten squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. Also, simultaneously, operating expenses for shops have gone through the roof, like they have for everyone. It's just become, it feels like both heydays are gone. The heyday of brick and mortar's gone. The heyday of multi-channel shops has gone and passed. And it's not to say they're obsolete by any means, but it makes them a lot less attractive businesses, and I say less of a good business. And by good, I mean relatively easy to operate, reasonable profits to the bottom line on a annual basis. They're just less attractive businesses. Um, all of that adds up. Like, seems as it's going to be hard to recruit new people to the sport and keep people to the sport, because the ramifications of just the way things have evolved kind of feels like there'll be less shops and less good ones. Um, I don't know, and maybe some consolidation. What are your thoughts on all that?
Um, yeah, there. Well, I definitely think things have changed. Um, I fundamentally, though, I think ridership is up and will only stay up. So I think there's more bike riders, which is ultimately that's critical, regardless of how things get to that rider. I do think, you know, most riders, at least from our perspective, aren't super comfortable taking, real deep care of their bike. They're not comfortable doing their 200-hour service on their rock shots and getting their derailleur set up just right. A lot of people aren't comfortable with it. Some are. YouTube helps that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So what I really think is I think the really good shops will change their model and they'll get better, and the shops that don't change will suffer, because they're gonna keep trying to solve a problem and the problem's changed, right? And so what I would really ask myself is what is the rider's, what's the opportunity with the rider, and am I providing that? um, and so I could imagine a more heavily focused service and some kind of value added approach at the bike shop, brick and mortar, in this case, is going to be more important in the future than like the P&A business or the parts and accessories business was before, because it's just too easy. The pandemic taught so many people, man, if I want, you know, a blank that I can easily mount on my bike myself or put in in my pocket, just buy now, it's there. It's, that just happened, right? Like it was happening before, like you said, starting whenever in 2010, but it really got accelerated in the pandemic. And so I think the model has to change. But I do think the really good ones will will get even better because they're thinking about the rider. They're like, what does the rider need, and am I providing that?
Mm-hmm. Do you think there'll be less of them, just like less shops in general?
Yeah, probably. Um, Although in the U.S., I think before the pandemic, there were 5,500 to 6,000 bike shops, um, and today there's somewhere between 5,500 and 6,000 bike shops. I'll bet if we have an anniversary call in a year, there'll be around 5,500 to 6,000 bike shops. Um, that doesn't mean, there's probably 500 that stop and 500 that start, every year too. But I do think that, the really well run, rider centric ones will do quite well. And I think the same thing applies for the online businesses as well. There's been bankruptcies in online businesses too. So it's not just one or the other.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think our prediction during the pandemic was that the good would get better and the bad would go away. Um, and I still think that's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice. What would be? I mean, if you were, running a bike shop yourself these days, what would be your sort of core focus to make sure you're staying, rider focused and leaning in the direction that's necessary?
That's a that's a really good question, and you are way more qualified to answer that than me, um, because you have experience. I don't. Um, but I would lean towards, like, why does the cyclist want to come to my shop and
Yeah.
start there? Yeah. And is it compelling, right? That whether that's a social aspect, a service aspect, but it's not to buy a chain, right? Because they might do that somewhere else. And so that's where I would start. That's kind of how we do things at SRAM, right? Like really start with, what is either the problem we're trying to solve or the opportunity that we're trying to create. Um, and I think the cyclist, the rider is the most important, thing to a bike shop.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you'd mentioned ridership is up. I'm curious what data points you look at personally to track that. I know People for Bikes has some information on it, but it is tricky when you niche down because general cycling, commuters, bike riding casually versus enthusiast mountain bikers versus enthusiast road cyclists. What data points are you looking at to try and understand the participation in the industry in the different segments?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of nailed a lot of what we look at. For sure, we look at the People for Bikes information.
Hmm.
Um, but I agree with you that that doesn't necessarily tell you how busy is the bike park or the trail that you ride. Um, so we pay attention to that. It turns out we have a ton of ceramics that ride bikes, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I if I had to guess, like 95% of ceramics ride a bike. And so we have that, like how busy are our local trails kind of all over the world. um, we also support a lot of events, um, and we know that those they sell out in minutes, anymore. And so more and more people want to do that. Like Stan, our founder, and I just participated in the Trekka 100 in Girona, and it was, I mean, it was crazy. Like try to go to Steamboat Gravel this year, and so event participation is way up. And then we, like our field guides, when they go out and they go to a trail or whatever, they're counting, how many cars are in the parking lot, compared to a time before, whatever. So there is no, you can't Google it. Um, but there are quite a few data points. And then we also belong to something similar to People for Bikes in Europe. They do a fairly good job of of counts as well. um, so it's an aggregation of imperfect science.
Yep. Totally. That's many things are in business. Or cool. Well, let's finish with a few rapid fire ones from the audience. Feel free to riff on any of these that you'd like. What does a bicycle drivetrain look like in 2050?
I don't know.
Me
I'm
neither.
pretty sure it'll be cooler and lighter than it is today.
Yeah.
um, there'll be something about it that's pretty exciting. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah. I should have put this question next. It's a couple down, but I'm just going to say it now. And you don't have to answer it, but gearbox. That's the question.
But yeah, like when will a gearbox be?
Yeah, all of it. Do you think you guys will ever make one? Are you interested in them? Are you intrigued, or is there a no comment?
I mean, I'm intrigued by like a lot of things. I think we all are. I think the reality, a gearbox, the maintenance of a gearbox would be pretty cool. Um, and so when we can come up with a way to make a gearbox lighter and more efficient than a drivetrain, that would be the time to do it.
Yeah,
Um, I just think those things are they're a bit in conflict with each other.
yeah, totally. I'm out of curiosity. Have you ridden a gearbox mountain bike like a Zerod?
I have no, I haven't ridden a Zerod. No.
Yeah, you should try one out. It is interesting. Drivetrain not nearly as good, but the to me what was interesting on a gearbox bike was just the weight, like the weight distribution feels actually more reminiscent of an e-bike in a way, like having all the weight low and centered. So I don't know, pretty cool. Obviously, you guys have got plenty of things in the bank. I actually went out to the SRAM facility in Germany. This was back in early 2020, back when you could still travel that year, and it was amazing to see the drivetrain engineering and testing in that facility. I was bewildered with what was going on there.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it's one of my favorite. I mean, 250 German engineers.
Yeah.
Um, it's awesome. Yeah.
Totally. Next question is, what percentage split between revenue is coming from OE versus aftermarket?
Yeah, it kind of ebbs and flows. But it's, in general, 70 to 75% would be, OE, and 25 to 30% would be aftermarket
Yeah.
typically. Yeah. And aftermarket's kind of a mix of, I need to repair my bike or, replace something. And then there's the build a bike from scratch, or, ooh, I want to do that upgrade.
Yeah.
All of that's in that side.
Totally. Nice. What does SRAM actually stand for? Is it an acronym?
Yeah, it's an acronym that, it's a tough one to follow. But so, there's 5 founders of SRAM. And so the S stands for Scott, Scott King. The RA is, Stan Ray Day. The RA out of Ray, not sure how that one, came up. And then the M is the M in Sam, who was the designer who kind of came up with the concept of the original grip shift. And so, like, why we picked the M in Sam and not the M in Mike Mercury, another founder, I don't know. But that's what it stands for.
Got it. I'm sure since you've joined SRAM, you've heard some various different ways it's said, and so have we over the years. Does everyone mutually agree it's SRAM, or do some people still go with the SRAM or the SCRAM or SHRAM?
Yeah, it's actually part of our new hire orientation.
Nice.
Like, how do you say it? And it's the way we teach it is Sri Lanka SRAM. It's the same SR. So, but yeah, it's been everything. Like in the first trade show that SRAM was at, we got listed as Scram.
Yeah.
And so that one's stuck with us a little bit. I think a couple of our German engineers made some bumper stickers that said Scram. It's SRAM.
Of course. Nice. Well, that's all I had for you. I again cannot thank you enough for coming on the pod. We'd love to have you again if possible at any given point. Any final words of wisdom for the probably roughly 20,000 mountain bikers that are going to hear this?
Not really. Just keep riding. And we love your feedback. Love to hear what you love. Love to hear what you don't love. We're really, really just trying to make mountain biking more fun and, make you faster. Whatever it is, the definition of fun, that's what we're going after. So
Yeah.
Let us know.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks again, Ken. Much appreciated.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.
If you have made it this far in the podcast, thank you very much. We genuinely appreciate it and your support. It would mean the world to us if you would share this episode with your mountain biker friends, tell them about the MTB podcast, and if you can, hop onto Apple Podcasts or Spotify and drop us a review. That really helps us out. Thank you so much for listening. As always, if you guys have any questions you want to hear us answer on the pod, or maybe at some point ask another huge high-level CEO of the bike industry, you can always email them to podcast@worldwidecyclery.com. We review every question and consider it for all future podcasts. Thanks again. Take care.